What I.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. It's a beautiful Tuesday across our state, a little bit windy for sure, but a great day. I know this week is very, very busy, especially with education at the state level. I want to thank all of our partners that are here and all those that we are going to see later in the week. We do have a Board of Regents. We also have the Board of Public Ed. We also have the Interim Education Committee, and we have the Governor's State Board. And it's in Missoula, so it'll be nice to see that western part of our state as well. We do have a simple agenda today, but great information that is going to be given. We have our chapter reviews, and I've got Deputy Allen that's going to be sharing about 57. And one of the things with this whole process of change, of making sure that the right thing is done, means that there's listening and a lot of voices to the table. And I do hope that more voices do come as this process goes further through the Board of Public Education. We have an Ian's update. Barb Quinn is going to be giving that. And then, of course, our ESSER update with Jeff Kirksey. So let's go ahead. Cheryl.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. It's always wonderful to see your smiling photos and knowing that you're there behind those. Brief update on Chapter 57. We did have a special meeting with CISPAC, of which many of you were able to listen in and participate in public comment, and that is greatly appreciated. And there were several requests for the task force to reconvene. That is happening this afternoon. They are reconvening to look at some of the key issues that were raised by educational partners at the CISPAC meeting. At the Board of Public Ed, we've got an updated timeline that will be presented to them, looking towards the superintendent's recommendations at the January Board of Public Ed meeting. And so really also listening to the message of be thoughtful and slow down a little bit. So we've been at this since the research phase started over a year now. And so I think it's important for folks to remember that this hasn't just started the task force itself, but there were several months prior to that at work. One of the key elements that we're striving to ensure that we target and align is the recommendations for Chapter 57 adjustments to rule, aligning that's completed about the same time as the new licensing system is completed. That RFP is completed. A company has been selected and is in their preliminary stages of work. And so as it's important for all of us to remember, it's the business rules that are put in to the programming that allows for the functionalities. And another time we'll go through with some of those very specific flexibilities and enhancements that will show up in the licensing system. I know what the field has asked. I know what several of you have asked, and that team is working on that. So we'll look forward to being able to provide you updates on that, as the field will, I'm sure, be just thrilled at the enhancements that will be available to our superintendents and principals, to our teacher candidates, to our teachers, to our clerks, all of those folks that work so diligently to ensure that we keep qualified, licensed, capable teachers in our school classrooms. So there was a focus on some flexibilities available. So I'll just highlight a couple for those that haven't been in the loop. One of those key flexibilities has been around whether or not the praxis in and of itself is a measure of quality, as that barrier to getting a license. if we go back into our history, we know that was a component of No Child Left Behind and the movement for high quality teachers. And that drove new teacher assessment performance systems and a lot of other. So it came back from the task force were multiple methodologies from demonstrating those key qualities and elements. So if you would, that ability for candidates to choose. Also with that, and one of the key flexibilities we've heard from the field is please don't require out-of-state experienced teachers when they come to Montana. Don't require them to take the praxis. They've already demonstrated through their successful experience in the classroom that they have quality and are effective teachers. So a lot of work has been done around that idea of what does it look like for folks bringing their licensing into here. I'll share an interesting statistic with you. We were on a call yesterday with some data work that's being done by Ed Northwest for us around our teachers and around licensing and around attrition rates. And an interesting statistic that was shared was 60% of Montana teachers are coming out of the Montana EPP system. 40% of those are coming from out of state. And so we think it's really important that we remember the importance of having effective quality teachers in the classrooms at this time. And the task force has looked at a good amount of data. We are on track to have the highest number of emergency licensures this year that we've experienced in the last 5 years. We think that's an indicator of what's happening in the challenges to get teachers in the classrooms in Montana. So we've got challenges ahead of us, and the 57 task force of which there's members on this call have just done some tremendous heavy lifting and some thoughtful dialogue and thinking about how we ensure that we get the most effective, capable teachers in our Montana classrooms. So thank you. And it's happy to give you a brief overview of where things are. Superintendent, you're on mute at this moment.
Thought for sure I was spot on. Okay, Cheryl, thank you. Any questions that anyone might ask of Cheryl? I do know at the Board of Public Ed, there is also another opportunity as some understanding will be going forward to them. Any questions you might have of Cheryl? Excellent. Again, recognizing all the voices that have contributed to what is an educator, a quality educator that is going to be in front of all of our children across our state. Thank you, Cheryl. Let's go ahead and move on then. I've got, if I could, Barb, if you could just share where we are with Ian's and an understanding of our non-public partners.
Okay. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to be here with you today. I will try to share my screen here. Can everybody see that? Can you see the blue and yellow?
Yep.
Okay, okay, awesome. So for the Ian's update, this is very similar. We're using a similar structure every time to report so that we have consistency with all of this. With Ian's 1, some of this you will have seen last time. We have 147 applications. Just a detail on this is that our homeschool applicants make up about 85% of those applications. We have a total allocation that came from the feds of $12.8 million. 200,000 of that we can use for administrative purposes, which means that our private and non-public distribution is 12.6%. We will be changing this to total awarded. There was some conversation about that in the last meeting. Right now, that sits at 3.2%. Was that a question? Okay, I'll carry on. So at this point in time, what the math means is that we would have about 9.3 million to revert. However, we have some continuing conversations going on with the feds. And so by December 15th, we should be able to update both the amount awarded and the amount that will revert to the budget office for the gear funding. And right now we have about 1.1 million that has been distributed to the schools through the cash reimbursement process. These have not changed since you saw them last time, that we have 28% to professional and technical services, 68% to computers and such. We have 2% to equipment that's over $5,000. And then other activities such as transportation and facilities, we have another 2%. Right now, we have, if you recall the last education advocates meeting, we were actually talking to the feds on that date, and we were talking to them about the new guidance that has come out for the EANs. And what we were looking at with that is putting forth a timeline for them for some of the activities that we have going on. And part of that includes that right now we have an EANS 1 additional needs survey. So that's where, when I talked about this total amount awarded here, that might go up. It's because we are asking the schools if there is anything else that they might need that would be within the bounds of the EANS 1 award allowables. And that survey closes on the 22nd of November. Again, we will have more information for the budget office probably about the 15th of December. Then on to EANS 2, we also have an intent to apply that is open on EANS 2. And that participation, it can include anybody from EANS 1 plus other applicants. However, there is a restriction on that they have to serve 40% of a population from low income, as well as they have to be in a county that is highly impacted by COVID. So what we have there is a little over $12 million that was provided from the feds. Again, $200,000 is available for administrative purposes, which means that we will have about 11.8 million to distribute to the private non-publics. And of course, we don't have any information here because we're not far enough into that process to be able to give any other information. Is there any questions on EANS?
Thanks, Barb. I appreciate that. And this program is embraced with Janie Solomon. And Barb, I very much appreciate your leadership in giving this for her today, since she couldn't be present. But this is quite an interesting dialogue that we're also having with the budget office and the governor's office, as well as these funds then will revert back to them. So we're doing everything we can to serve our homeschool population, as well as our non-public school system that we do have in our state. Thank you, Barb. Let's go ahead and move on then to the ESSER updates with Mr. Kirksey. Morning, Jeff.
Good morning. Well, thanks for letting me join you today. I have several ESSER updates for you. I think first what we'll do is I'll share my screen and we'll take a look at where we are at. Are you seeing the table with green and yellow columns?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. All right, so Janie and I have actually worked together to kind of align our tables so you get a good sense. I do want you to know as well too that we are housing these updates on our website now too, and so before we go, I'll give you a quick tour of our website where some good information is. But I do want to let you know too, these aren't the final November numbers yet. And the reason for that is we had a death in our family and we had to travel to Oregon. And so I did this before we left. But our final November numbers will actually come out this week. And so I'll be updating the table just so it's better in line with our cash request process. So, but I don't think it'll vary greatly from what we go over today. So there's still value in going over this today. But if you want the official November numbers, those should be up on our website by the end of the week. So just to remind you too, why the two different colors. The green for ESSER 1, that actually, when we get down to percentages, we're actually working with actual expenditures. So you'll remember that the obligation period for ESSER 1 is September 30th of 2022. So we are about 10 months away. And so, and you'll see we have about $10 million left to spend out of ESSER 1 from what has been budgeted. And so, so it's green because we're dealing with actual expenses, and no big shift there. You'll see this number continues to rise, and we are making an effort every time that we're in front of our colleagues across the state, reminding them that that obligation period is coming. And so if they have not obligated all of their ESSER 1 dollars, they need to do that now. But the percentages have held pretty steady in how those funds are being used. I won't go into that into great detail unless you have any questions there. We have seen a good uptick in the use of ESSER 2 dollars. You'll remember that ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 applications were due the 1st of September, although we're still working to get some schools and districts in. But we have, of that $160 million that was allocated to LEAs across the state, so far 140, just over $140 million of that have been budgeted. And so that number's coming along nicely. With 95% in, we should get up to that 160 fairly soon in the budgeted category. And allocations have really, expenditures have really started to kick in for ESSER 2 as well. So we have about 30 million, just short of 30 million that has been spent to date. The percentages are still holding steady here. You'll see that staffing is still the largest piece of the pie, whether that's going to educators or paraprofessionals, counseling supports, some funds towards the administration of these grants or these funds, as well as facility staffing. So and probably the most marked difference between ESSER 1 and ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 is the use of funds on property improvements. Still HVAC being the largest percentage of those changes, but we are seeing some facilities renovations and facilities expansions. So, and that is true for ESSER 3 as well. So ESSER 3, we are still rustling up applications there. I had given school districts a deadline of trying to get that in to me by the 15th of this month. Kind of been working directly with school districts that we still needed to hear from. So this number does not reflect folks that actually got their budgets in Thursday, Friday, and Monday, the last few days. So, and you'll see modest spending there, $6.1 million to date. that will continue to lag behind ESSER 2. ESSER 2 will be obligated and spent before ESSER 3 because it's a year shorter in terms of obligation period. Couple things on the ESSER front that I did want to share with you. Are you seeing the ESSER website now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So a couple things. We have been in communication with districts this week regarding their district ARP ESSER plan. This was a plan that was required with ESSER $3 through the ARPA allocation, and the U.S. Department of Education required that schools publish a plan, make that available to the public, and update it every 6 months. And so what we're doing right now, my colleagues here at OPI have actually gone through every plan that's submitted, reviewed that plan for compliance with the federal requirements, and last Wednesday, we actually sent that feedback out to all districts. So they got feedback from OPI on their plan. Today, we will send out information on, now that they've seen their plan review, how they actually can go in and update their plans. So that will go out this afternoon. And then tomorrow, we are actually doing 2 different webinars that we invite participation in. We'll be going over the plan review, and we're also going to be previewing the data collection that the federal government is going to be which is in the process of solidifying, but they keep giving us a better and better idea of what that data collection is going to look like. So we want to give schools a good heads up on that. Some of our dates here on the calendar, if you want to join those webinars, they are here. I'll also do an open office hour on Thursday, just to field any questions that people have specifically related to their plan review. Our data collection due date on December 17th, that may change. We just learned on Friday that the federal government is looking at our data collection not being due until after the 1st of March. That gives us a little more time. And so we may be changing that date for when data will be due. But we're going to go ahead now and give a preview of what that data collection will look like. The other piece I wanted to share with you today is we are getting lots of questions from school districts about how they are to use their ESSER dollars as it relates to enrollment increases. And so we have been working on some guidance. We will be sending that guidance out, as well as preliminary budget numbers for schools based on the enrollment information we have now. And we do really emphasize preliminary when we send that out, because as you well know, enrollment can be updated up until the 31st of December. And so then after that update window has passed, then we'll finalize those numbers. But we do want to give schools an update of what their budget will be looking like, so they can continue to plan. And we'll be sending that out before the month is out, and we will also in early December hold some office hours to field any questions related to use of ESSER dollars as it relates to enrollment increases and school budget impact.
Thank you. Any questions for Jeff? A lot of information flow for sure. Excellent. I do have another.
Superintendent.
Of course.
Sorry, it's Pat. Hey, Jeff, here's a thought. I feel like there's a narrative that districts have access to a ton of money, and I don't think that narrative is inaccurate. But the second part of the narrative is, and they're not spending it. And I think that narrative is increasingly inaccurate. And I base that because I get your monthly updates, and I know that these awesome little temperature gauges that you put down here, these red things, are going up.
Yeah.
But I think if somebody just looked at that, they might say, oh, that narrative is true, that districts have access to all this money and they're not spending it. I wonder if there would be a way to add, like, what's the monthly increase in usage or something like that, just to get at that narrative. And maybe others aren't hearing that narrative, but I just wanted to throw that in. Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, no, thanks, Pat. That's some great feedback. I will tell you too, like, if you, these status updates are actually going on our website. So, so down here, if you are talking to people and they have questions, so these status updates will go up every month. And so the one that we went over last month, the October allocations, is right here. And then as soon as I finalize November's, which you previewed here today, we'll put that up as well. But that's a good idea. Like, I agree, like the thermometer, I mean, because we're looking at such big, large amount of dollars, but and we're actually only looking at expenses and not actually what schools have budgeted. It is a little misleading. So yeah, we'll look at that and see what we can do on that front.
Thanks, Pat. If I can understand, then you're discussing about a change, and I see, Denise, you've got something in the chat box regarding change from the color of red to green to show that delta. I think is important. The other aspect, you know, Jeff, you talked about ESSER $1, and we're coming 10 months from when that needs to be reviewed by schools and come to us with those dollars. If everyone that's on here, if with all your association and your relationships with schools, if you could really aid us in that same message on spending those dollars first before getting into ESSER 2 and 3, I think that would be very beneficial. So we have a unified message. And Jeff can help in making sure that it is unified so that schools get one voice rather than a chorus of different, for sure. Any other questions for Jeff? Okay, I do have an individual that is here. This is Chad. And Chad, if you could just share your role in the deployment for broadband through any of the federal dollars that might be coming through. Chad comes to us from the Department of Administration. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. And thank you, Superintendent. I'm Chad Roop. I used to be the Rural Utilities Service Administrator under the previous administration. And in that role, I deployed about $18 billion worth of federal funds over the course of 2 years. A large portion of funding that was worked on during that time was, of course, the national effort to build out broadband. So I dealt with this at a national level, and I've been on the state system now for about a month and a half, working on trying to stand up our state broadband program. So I'm thrilled to be here. I'm originally from Wyoming. I've spent over 30 years in that state and a lot of recent activity there. So this is a program that I have very much a passion to deliver, and it's an opportunity for the state of Montana to really take advantage of something that is desperately needed, as we've all seen with COVID. You know, I had the unfortunate or fortunate privilege, however you want to take it, of having to deal with delivering federal funds during the COVID epidemic and having folks travel nationally during that time frame to build out those critical infrastructure projects. So this is something that everyone understands the need of it now, and I'm glad to see that Montana has taken an active role to do that. So one of the things that I'm working on diligently right now is trying to build out our website and our broadband map. If you guys have not been aware of it yet, you may not, that we have stood up a website called connectmt.mt.gov. You can also get to it using the ARPA website that has been stood up by the governor's office under the communications tab. The ConnectMT program is obviously something that was administered or authorized under the last legislature, and it's something that we're working to build that program out in full. One of our stated goals is to get the broadband map published very quickly. We plan to do so in December. And if you look at any federal program, that is beyond ambitious. But the good news is we have the website up. We're going to get this map published. We have a vendor selected, and we're working diligently to get the contract established right now. And even though it's a very ambitious schedule, I think it's key to understand that this is going to be an iterative process. And the reason that I'm mentioning this to you is because we need your feedback. As we all know, a lot of the information that gets put out by providers at the national level greatly overstates coverage. And so I want to ensure that when we get this map published through this iterative process at a granular level, we understand who has service and who does not have service. And getting your feedback and the parents' feedback is really important in doing that. If you give us that opportunity, we will be able to update those locations and make sure that we're properly spending the $270 million that we currently have allocated to the program. Everybody's aware of the infrastructure bill that went through Congress and just got signed yesterday. That's going to deliver another $100 million, but we don't know when that money is going to be available to us. So we really want to work hard to get this initial funding out, and then hopefully have future iterative rounds of funding opportunities for these unserved areas. One of the things that I think is also important in understanding this program is when we look at service, we're looking at basically 100 symmetrical as true future-proof service. And I, just being in the state a short time, I can tell you that it's very clear that there's a large portion of the state that doesn't have that. And we look at it on a 24/7, 365 basis. And I want to ensure that when people are looking to gain service, that they understand that's really what we're looking at, is that 100 symmetrical, which is really fiber to the home in a lot of cases, or in other cases, we can get there with fixed wireless as long as we have fiber to the tower. So there's a lot of opportunity here for us to take a leap forward. And gaining that feedback from parents and teachers and broadband providers is really critical. And speed tests help with that and can give the parents immediate access to know whether or not the broadband provider that has listed their location as served or hits that framework of over 120, they can provide clear feedback to us so that we can update those maps and let people know, especially the providers, of, hey, your service that you're claiming is not what people are witnessing on site and on location. That will help us a lot with any challenges that we get in based off applications that we receive. Because what I've seen at the federal level is a lot of times providers will try to protect their territories, even though that they're not truly serving that area. And I want it to be granular, and I want people to say whether or not they have service coming in. You know, another key piece of this that I think is important for awareness, and I spoke with superintendent about this yesterday, is looking at the matching requirements that are coming from these recipients. According to the bill that was passed in the last legislature, any of these funds that people are going to be requesting to build out these areas is going to require a 20% match that comes from a non-federal source. That is also part of working with the different local governments and school districts. So there's an opportunity here to hit that distance learning component and talking about end use devices. I'm working with the Treasury Department. I've got contacts there to make sure that we're working in accordance with the Treasury rules according to ARPA 602. But my intent there is that we can use some of that opportunity for the matching to get these broadband providers the level of match that is required to build out into these areas, so that if you have a series of students that are needing devices in an unserved area, that can be used as a matching component from the provider to build out access to these locations. So those are some of the things we're working on. I would encourage everybody to monitor the website, monitor the broadband map, and watch the delivery of these funds. And if you have sites that are unserved, especially rural schools and different locations of that nature, we want to know that, because I'm going to be working with the Montana Telecom Association and a series of other folks to ensure that we are getting you what you need and what you ask for, and that broadband providers are actively delivering what they claim to provide. So with that, I will I guess maybe open it up for a brief set of questions, understanding that I've got to deal with the commission here on Thursday to give them an update, and I don't want to get too far out in front of the briefing that I'm doing to the commissioners to make sure that we've got all of our ducks aligned before we make things public. So with that, I guess I'll open it up for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chad. Any questions? A lot of information. And I just want to say thank you to the Department of Administration for lending you today on this discussion. What I'd like to do, folks that are here and those that may not be here, is put a simple gathering together with Chad in the room to really understand what does this mean for schools. He talked about a 20% match. Talked about something that is going to be not just from the infrastructure bill that was just recently signed, but also moving forward into the future from our legislature. So I believe it's incumbent upon us to really visit again. And I'm going to say again, our schools are dealing with so much, but if we can have a unified voice going out of a request of them, not just a simple survey coming from however, but really a meaningful question to see how it is that we can better serve in that digital learning moving forward, so that understanding what our Constitution is with equality, that we are there. So any questions you might have of Chad?
One thing I
Chad?
did fail
Yes.
to mention, if you don't mind, Superintendent, we will have a portal for people to provide that feedback on the map and on the website, so that there won't be any question on where do you go to provide that feedback. We'll have that readily available for you.
Excellent. And I think that's a great capture right there. What I would like to do, though, is when we send all of our meeting notes and our reflections back to the group that's here and the group that was busy and couldn't attend, his contact information will be there, as well as the link to that website, so that if you have any other questions. But the education advocates that we have here, I would like to also then request the 1st of December to have some sort of a gathering. And Chad, you can visit with the commission and say that the education group is getting together and is backing anything, if they need any presentation on what is happening in education for the delivery of internet to enhance those devices for learning. We're here. So with that, I'd like to say thank you, Chad, and enjoy the rest of your day. The other aspect is the Department of Commerce has also reached to us most recently regarding water and sewer projects. And so we'll be sending some information out on that. There were just 2 that I believe in the first round of funding of schools that did use this as an enhancement, and now they're seeking more. So it's up to us as leaders and you as leaders in your organizations to better further this message, so that all can be there. We're a little over a half hour. If there's nothing else to add to this. I know it's a very, very busy week. I appreciate all that you are doing to enhance our students moving forward. Also, Thanksgiving is going to be upon us next week. We have so many blessings, especially because we do live in this beautiful state, but embrace your families during this Thanksgiving time. With that, I wish you all well. Thank you.